Trench Club is an epic strategy game set in the First World War. Four players play in two teams, Germany and Austria-Hungary, against France and Great Britain. This is how to play it. Let's start with the setup first. Sit around the table so that two allied players are not sitting next to each other. Each player places their unit mat in front of them. If you are playing for the first time, we recommend you familiarize yourself with the different unit types first. Find the according miniature for each of the 10 sections on the unit map. One miniature goes on each slot of the unit mat, with one exception. For the infantry, there are two versions: the mounted infantry on horses and the regular infantry on foot. They are the same units except their movement speed. The infantry on horses is faster. All the unit types are the same for each faction, with two exceptions. France and Austria-Hungary have a howitzer, which is that one, while Great Britain and Germany have a field gun. That's a similar unit, but the miniature has a little shield at the front of it. The second exception is the unit on the bottom right. That's a country-specific unit that is different for each faction. Now, let's start with the game setup. The Austria-Hungary player starts the game with 3 war bonds. That is money. Now, start handing out 3 start tokens upside down to each player. Each player takes his 11 units and divides them as he wishes into 3 groups on these start tokens. That will define the 3 armies you are starting with. You can distribute the units any way you want. If you are playing for the first time, we recommend the following setup. On the first start token, put the mounted infantry, the armored car, and the fighter aircraft. On the second one, place your infantry, the tank, your howitzer or field gun, and your anti-aircraft gun. On the third token, put your remaining units. After each player has defined their 3 starting armies, it is time to place them on the map. Note that the tokens are turned upside down so you don't know where your armies will end up. Roll a die to determine which placer can place their units first. Then go clockwise. The starting player turns over one of his tokens and finds the corresponding number on the game board. The player then places their first army there. He must put 1 unit in the middle on the number, and the rest of the units in adjacent fields around it. Then go clockwise and the next player does the same. That's a 2. The position is here. 1 unit goes in the middle, the other units go around it. The game board should look something like this now, and we can start the actual game. Roll a die again to determine the starting player, then go clockwise. Now the first turn starts. Each turn consists of 6 different phases, which is also indicated on the quick reference sheet. The first phase is to move troops. Then name attacks. Do combat. Collect your money. Repair units, and then purchase additional units. Each player plays these 6 phases, and then it is the next player's turn, and that player plays the 6 phases. Let's look at the move phase first. In the move phase, the player can move all his units he wants. How far a unit can move depends on its speed and the terrain the unit is moving to. The speed of the unit is indicated on the unit map. This armored car has 4 movement points. For convenience, the movement points are also embossed with little dots on the miniature itself. Different types of terrain consume a different amount of movement points. Regular meadow fields consume 1 movement point per hex. Roads only half a movement point. Forests 1.5 movement points. To move into a water field or conquer an enemy or neutral fort takes the full turn. Entering an own fort or boarding a transport truck costs only half a movement point. There is one exception. When a unit has only half a movement point left at the end of its turn, the unit may still move to a meadow hex. This rule is to avoid convoys jamming on roads. Let's now see how this works. This armored car has 4 movement points. I'll go on a forest first, which takes 1.5 movement points. On a road, an additional half movement point, so we are at 2. 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. The tank has 3 movement points, so I go 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. 3. Note that the exception rule allows to move on a meadow with your last half movement point. The infantry has 2 movement points. I'll move 1/2. And I decide to stop here because I want to conquer the fort next turn, and this will take the full movement turn of the infantry. Units surrounded by enemies must of course be extra careful. If a unit is adjacent to an enemy unit 2 times in a row, it may not move any further. First, enemy contact. Second, enemy contact in a row, the tank cannot move any further. Foot soldiers may capture neutral or enemy forts. Foot soldiers are all units with a little man on the miniature. So infantry, mounted infantry, heavy infantry, and anti-tank gunners. Each fort has 2 entrance fields, one on the right, one on the left side. To conquer a fort, a foot soldier just needs to enter an entrance field of the fort. This will cost them their full movement turn. That means the foot soldier must already be waiting at an adjacent field. Note that each entrance on each side has 4 of those adjacent fields. When you conquer a fort, mark the fort with one of your flag chips. It is now yours. Others of your units can now enter the fort as well if they want to. Entering own forts costs them only half a movement point. Be aware, your enemy can also conquer your forts. Once a foot soldier conquers a fort, all enemy units in the fort are immediately destroyed. So don't conquer a fort or leave units in it if there is an enemy foot soldier adjacent to an entrance. If you want to move your units quicker, you can use a troop transport truck. The truck can transport up to 4 foot soldiers or artillery units. These eligible units are marked with an according symbol on the unit map. First, the units enter the transport truck one after the other in their normal movement turn. Then, the transport truck carries out its movement turn. Finally, it unloads all units onto adjacent empty hexes. These units cannot move any further this turn. The next phase is to name attacks. Simply tell your opponent who is attacking whom in sequence. Units can attack opponent units within their range as indicated on the unit chart. The heavy mortar, for example, can attack units that are 2 to 5 hexes away. Name your attacks like this. This heavy mortar attacks the German armored car. Then the infantry attacks it. This anti-aircraft gun attacks the Austrian fighter aircraft. Then the heavy infantry attacks the fighter aircraft. Note that air units can only be attacked by other air units, anti-aircraft, and heavy infantry with machine guns. This is indicated on the unit map with the cloud symbol. The next phase is the combat phase. All units named in the previous phase will now attack. Let's start with this heavy mortar. First, determine the number of dice you may roll based on the amount damage the unit has. This heavy mortar has no damage, so I may roll all 12 dice. Now, we check which of the dice landed a hit. This depends on the strength of the unit that is printed on the unit map and is also embossed on the miniature itself. The heavy mortar has a strength of 3. That means it will hit with each die showing a 3 or less. Let's count the hits. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, let's see how these hits translate into damage to the armored car. It has strong armor, so the 4 hits only cause 2 damage. It would have required 6 hits to cause 3 damage. If the attacked armored car was in a forest, it would even require 7 hits to cause 3 damage. Put 2 gray damage markers on the armored car. The heavy mortar gets 1 combat experience because it has damaged an enemy unit. Now to the next combat. The infantry also attacks the armored car. Because the fighting units are in adjacent fields, this is considered a close combat, which means the defender can fire back. Again, let's determine the number of dice depending on the damage. The armored car has 2 damage, so it may roll 10 dice. The infantry has 3 damage already, so it may roll 8 dice. The infantry already has 3 combat experience. Normally, it would only hit on a 2 or less, but due to its combat experience, it hits on a 4 or less. The armored car also hits on each dice with a 4 or less. Let's roll the dice. That is 1, 2, 3, 4 hits from the infantry. Bad luck, the armored car only landed 2 hits. Let's read the table again. The 4 hits from the infantry also cause 2 damage on the armored car. The 2 hits from the armored car causes 1 damage to the infantry. Since both units have damaged an enemy unit, both get 1 additional experience point. Both units survive this combat. If a unit suffers its 6th damage, it's destroyed and removed from the board. One more thing. If you attack from a strategically favorable position, you will get extra dice. If another one of your units is adjacent to the attacked unit, that is considered a flank attack, and you get 2 extra dice. If this unit is directly opposite of the attacker, or 2 or more of your units support the attack, that is a surround attack, and you get even 3 extra dice. After all combats from this round are done, the next phase begins: money transactions. Collect 3 war bonds for each of your forts. You can now repair units in your forts. Repairing takes a full turn and costs as indicated on the unit mat. All damage markers are removed from the unit. Finally, new units can be purchased. Pay the purchase price and place the new unit in any one of your forts. Now the player's turn is completed, and the next players take turns one after another in a clockwise direction. The team that first occupies 9 forts or destroys all enemy units wins the game. However, usually one team surrenders before this happens. Now you are ready for your first game of Trench Club. Thanks for watching and enjoy the game.